Moondrop's IEMs are quite popular. This company caters to a wide spectrum of audiophiles, those with very small to large budgets. One of Moondrop's standout products has been the Starfield. Now, the company has released the second iteration for $110. The folks at Apos Audio sent me the Starfield 2 for review. Apos is among a few retailers that specializes in audiophile gear, so check them out if you're looking for new toys. Now, let's try to find out what the new Starfield has to offer. Moondrop says that the new Starfield is tuned to present a, quote, natural, open, and finely detailed sound. The company says there are physical design differences between the old and new Starfield, including a new pressure vent. In fact, a key feature is the ability to plug the vent with a provided accessory to increase bass output. But frankly, you can do that with any IEM with a bass port. Hopefully, the new Starfield's vent was actually designed for this and is not just an afterthought. Moondrop does not provide any other real differences between the two products. The color and size are similar, if not the same. The weight is very similar. Both use the same kind of detachable cable. Sadly, Moondrop does not provide a frequency response graph to compare the original Starfield to the new one. However, you can easily find graphs online. The various graphs I looked at seem to show one consistent theme. Both the new and old Starfield have a very similar sound signature based on measurements alone. The differences seem to be mostly in the 3 kHz peak on the Starfield 2 and an emphasis in treble. For those who found the original Starfield's voicing too scratchy or sibilant, well, beware of the new version. The Starfield 2's bass response has a significant alteration with the bass plug, according to the various graphs. Overall, the Starfield 2 seems to stick very close to the original in design and accessories. It's well built, though is heavy to wear. I could wear this IEM for about 2 hours before needing a break. Let's just get to the overall impression of the sound signature. I paired the new Starfield with my FIO BTR7, Low 2PA S1, Matrix Mini I Pro 3, EcoZerta ITM03, and straight into the headphone sockets of those few devices that still have them. I listened to my test playlist on Amazon Music HD, streamed lossy content on Spotify and YouTube, and consumed a wide assortment of other digital media, including TV shows and movies while using the Starfield. I did true A/B comparisons using my passive switchbox connected to my Mini I Pro 3 and used Voice Meter Banana. I compared against the original Starfield, the Quarks, and the Aria. Yes, I could have compared against many other IEMs I have been sent, but that's just far too much for anyone to do. The IEM landscape is littered with an overwhelming number of options, and that is not necessarily a good thing. So I stuck with Moondrop popular options, if nothing else than for my own personal sanity. Initially, I did not plug the bass port. With that, it seemed to me that the new Starfield has elevated bass when compared against the more neutral Quarks. The difference was quite noticeable. Clarity was marginally more noticeable on the Quarks. The first and second gen Starfield appear to have almost identical bass rendition, again, without that bass port plugged. Transients, clarity, detail, and sub-bass and mid-bass separation seemed, again, similar. I might hazard that the new Starfield might have ever so slightly more clarity in this regard, but it's nothing significant. It also appeared that the new Starfield has somewhat harder drum impacts, sharper than the first generation. Compared to the Aria, I'd say that the differences were, again, minute. The new Starfield is a little bit clearer in the bass compared to the Aria, with marginally better separation and harder drum impact. But frankly, as I mentioned in the Aria review originally, the Aria and the first generation Starfield sound very similar themselves. The mids are fairly different, or at least noticeably different on the new Starfield compared to these other 3 IEMs. The Quarks, by the way, offer the most neutral rendition. This IEM does not emphasize or push sibilance or vocal grain, but the old Starfield and Aria do emphasize vocal sibilance by a few decibels. Now, the new Starfield pushes that sibilance more than the older version and more than the Aria. It's not necessarily piercing, nothing like what I experienced with the HD560S, which is hands down the most harsh I've ever heard in this respect. But the new Starfield is a few decibels more peaky than the original version and the Aria. This means that if you hate sibilance, or you found the original Starfield and Aria pushing your limits, you will hate what the new Starfield is offering. Mid-frequency separation and clarity is a bit more obvious on the new Starfield. Vocals do tend to stand out more on this IEM than the others I compared against, and that has a lot to do with the 2 to 5 kHz peak this new version has. Vocals always stand ahead of instruments, but drums sometimes vie for attention. Bass-heavy tracks with vocals might sound a bit muddy. Instrument separation on the new Starfield is a little bit more obvious than on the other 3 IEMs. Treble is also different from the other IEMs. The new Starfield has a greater emphasis in the mid-treble at least. That gives the impression of slightly more detail and clarity, but it also tends to make some instruments sound a bit harsher or more present, more piercing. In comparison, the Quarks was easily the most neutral sounding, and it did not make any recording sound harsh, even at excessive volumes. The Aria and original Starfield have very similar tuning and treble, but the Aria, when splitting hairs, tends to offer just a bit more clarity and slightly more treble push. When compared against the new Starfield, well, the new Starfield has even greater treble emphasis. As for soundstage, I'd say that the new Starfield definitely has wider soundstage than the Quarks. Frankly, the new Starfield has slightly wider voicing compared to the Aria and the original Starfield. However, the 10 Hi-Fi T2 has noticeably wider soundstage than the new Starfield. Moondrop says that the new Starfield has noteworthy detail ability. I don't think so. At least, it's nothing to really champion about. Yes, the new Starfield sometimes makes certain details stand out a bit more than the older version or the Aria and definitely the Quarks. But it's not as if the new Starfield renders details that you could not hear on those other 2 IEMs, the original Starfield and the Aria, I mean. It's not really like night and day. Sharp intakes of breaths, twangs of guitar strings, multiple vocalists, creaking of wood, electric buzzing effects, gravelly natures of vocals. These types of details are quite apparent on the new Starfield and maybe a bit more present than the original Starfield or the Aria. But like I said, it's not a night and day difference. In my new light footstep test, the new Starfield rendered 8 to 9 clear footsteps. The Quarks presented 5, the original Starfield gave me 6, and the Aria rendered 7. I also listened to the new Starfield with the vent plugs like we talked about. There's a very, very obvious difference when this is done. Bass is considerably emphasized, less detailed, muddier, more prone to distortion, and tends to overwhelm other elements in a track. Clarity is reduced, detail is less obvious, and frankly, the whole experience can be fatiguing, depending on your track and personal preferences. In short, the new Starfield has some noticeable deviation from the original. Vocals stand out more, there's marginally greater detail in soundstage, and more emphasized treble. Look, I think there are just too many IEMs in the market at this point. Companies are not reinventing the concept. We just keep getting the same old thing, sometimes in a new package, often with minute tuning alterations to justify the marketing claiming it's a new signature. We still lack real options for neutral IEMs. Why? When I look at the Starfield 2, I have just one thought. The question, as I just said, why? Why did they make this thing? What does it do that is new or innovative? Why should anyone who has the Aria or original Starfield be enticed to buy this second version of the Starfield? I just cannot fathom it. This new Starfield seems more like a lazy attempt at selling a so-called new Starfield rather than a true evolution. There is nothing new here. Tin Hi-Fi did that over and over again with their T2, so I get it. It's an easy way to get money. But when you're charging over $100, you really should put in more effort. I don't think the vent plugs are anything to cheer about on this second Starfield. It does not help the sound signature. If you like boomy bass, you can get that here, but there are other IEMs out there specifically designed for that kind of bass, so you might want to look there if you're in the market for something like that. I also don't understand why companies keep pushing that sibilance threshold. Over and over again, it's the same nonsense. They push the 2 to 5 kilohertz to make it appear as if vocals stand out. That's not necessarily how the music was meant to be heard, as audiophiles constantly gripe about when they're talking about amps and DACs. So, depending on your recording, you could either hear background vocalists a little bit more clearly, or incredibly sharp sibilance that pierces your ears and make you want to bleed. Then there's the treble. I don't think it's harsh, but it also does not sound particularly natural. If you're sensitive to treble, you will hate it here. If you thought the aria was too dark, then you'll think this is a step in the right direction. So, frankly, here's my bottom line. Moondrop did nothing here that could not be replicated on the original Starfield using some EQ tweaking. The sound signature, but for noted few differences I talked about, is very similar to the original Starfield in Aria. This means that if you own those two other IEMs, I just don't see the reason why you should waste money on the new Starfield. But if you don't have the original version or the Aria, then you have to think about a few aspects. Are you sensitive to sibilance and treble? If the answer is yes, then this IEM probably will not make you happy. I suppose that the Starfield 2 is a fine IEM by itself. But when you compare it, I'm just not sure it really does enough to justify its existence. I don't think that the $110 price tag is offensive for this IEM. I just think you need to understand what you want. And if you think this should be your next IEM, then I can't see why you should not buy it. But don't go in expecting a huge difference from the older version. I'm just so tired and frustrated with these companies, these hi-fi companies, continually dishing out the same repetitive stuff. These guys need to knock it off. It's just more junk and trash that's being thrown into the market. Do something new. Constantly talking about how innovative your design structure is on your new IEM or your new headphone is not going to cut it anymore, guys. Please think about true new ways to create your products. Give us sound signatures that we don't already have or cannot easily replicate using EQ.